This is Marsha Stonehill with Melt the Ice. Today on Operation F.L.O.W, in honor of Black History Month, the King George NAACP presents Mr. Harold Jefferson. Let me tell you a little bit about Mr. Harold Jefferson. I have in front of me a letter written by the administration of the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. This was written on December 23rd, 2011, in honor of Mr. Jefferson's retirement. Well, the letter reads as follows. Congratulations on your retirement from NASA. You must be proud of the tremendous success you have achieved throughout your long and distinguished service to the agency, NASA headquarters, and this nation. During your 37 years in the government, most of it in NASA's Office of Procurement, you have made important contributions to the agency's mission. There are few people who have made such a strong, long-lasting mark at NASA. All through your career, you have displayed exceptional skills in procurement, which are essential to meeting the goals of NASA. Time and again, you have demonstrated your procurement expertise guiding the mission offices, providing invaluable procurement direction on critical NASA missions, especially in your support of human exploration. Nowhere is that more true than on the International Space Station. You personally managed all headquarters acquisition planning and execution for the space station beginning before the first piece of hardware was flown and continuing until your retirement. You made history years ago, awarding the agency's first contract with the quote, new, end quote, Russian government. Then again, with the agency's first award to the Brazilian Space Agency and the first commercial resupply service payloads to the space station. Your work after Hurricane Katrina on emergency procurement needs and funding for the Michoud Assembly Facility will never be forgotten. You should be very proud of the work you have done. Jeff, you gained the respect of people across NASA. Your loss will be keenly felt both personally and professionally. Your devoted service to NASA, NASA headquarters, and ultimately this country is commendable. I wish you the best in your future pursuits. It is my sincere hope that you, Pam, and your entire family will be able to share quality time and create new memories while you reflect fondly on your friends, colleagues, and experiences at NASA. Sincerely, Charles Bolden, Jr., the Administrator for NASA. Mr. Jefferson, otherwise known as Jeff, I see. Thank you so much for being with us today. We are honored to have you presenting and sharing with us in honor of Black History Month. Thank you for being with us.
You are so welcome, and it's a pleasure to participate in a very special segment of our lives for the Black History Month in support of the NAACP in the King George County area.
So, were you born and raised here in King George?
I was, in fact, born and raised in King George. Back in I won't give my age per se, but I was, in fact, born in King George back in the early 50s, shall we say. And I came from a family of meager beginnings and possessions, but we shared a cohesive love and care for each other that continues through this day. And I'm so thankful for that support as I travel through my journey. And what I hope to accomplish here is to discuss how the culmination of my retirement letter led up to where we are and how I started out. which I think is very important for everyone to understand the journey, because when you're on the journey, it's extremely difficult and sometimes frustrating to get to where you're trying to go, but you have to have that perseverance, be dedicated to your dream, and not give up on it regardless of what someone may say or attempt to do to you along that journey. So as I reflect back on King George, I attended Ralph Bunche High School until the 10th grade. Of course, that's when we had total desegregation in King George County at that time. And as I look back over my high school career in King George and the friendships that I developed over time, some have gone, some are still intact, but it's a memory that you share, but you also learn to move on, because God has something else greater for us to do. Now, in terms of further reflecting on those high school years, I had the distinction of being one of the players in my junior year to be a part of the King George Basketball State Championship team, which in itself was quite an accomplishment in the county, because we laugh sometimes when I talk to some of my older buddies. We believe that everyone in King George on that date was down in Charlottesville, and there was great support coming from the county, and we were able to win that championship game. And by the way, it was the same team that we had lost to the previous year. So that was a great accomplishment to come back and defeat that team with some of the same players on it. So that was great for us. And so that will always be in my heart as it pertains to King George. And then also getting inducted into King George Ralph Bunche Hall of Fame back in 2010 will be a memory as well.
Yes.
But so with that being said, are there any questions as it relates to my early background before I move on to attending college?
So do you care to share anything about your transition from segregation to desegregation?
Well, I am one that probably came along later, whereas I truly applaud those that had gone before me. So they had sort of established the ground rules or the understanding and the acceptance to whatever degree that we could be accepted back in that point in time. So for me personally, it was not a difficult transition. And also being an athlete, it made things a little easier to make that transition, because basketball was big in King George and everyone followed basketball. So we came together, as a team, not only on the basketball court, but to a large extent in the school as well. Now, that's not to say there may not have been isolated incidents along the way, because that's part of life. But I view that as sort of a point in time in King George that really helped to support what we were trying to accomplish in the community.
I've heard a lot of people say that athletics was very helpful in creating, I don't know, camaraderie of some sort, or just connection, or helping with that process. You're not the first person I've heard say that. So then...
And of course, winning helps. When you're
right.
a winner, everybody likes to follow a winner.
Sure.
In life.
Right. So, so tell us more then about your then leaving King George High School. I guess one of the things I was wondering, you did say in the beginning too, did you always dream of working for NASA? Is that something that was in your mind from a young child, or?
No, I cannot say that I had that dream in advance. My dream was to, number one, do well in school, get a really good job, and help support my family.
Okay.
That was the goal, because it's so important to give back, because my family supported me along the way. Even when I first attended James Madison University, my family was always there for me. My oldest brother, Kelly, actually took me to James Madison for the first time, and just said, well, here you are, and pretty much dropped me off, and I was on my own in a strange environment.
Yes.
So we've always been there for each other, and that's a reflection, I think, that we as a community, as a world and a nation, should recognize that working together, we can accomplish so much more, and that's the invaluable asset that NASA as a federal government agency brings to the forefront, because there are so many people that desire to work for NASA, and it is a great agency, and it's some of the most brilliant people in the world that you will ever meet, not only federal employees, but also employees from the private sector, because they're just so dedicated and willing to make that sacrifice to accomplish activities that can come back later on, hopefully through research and studies that will make us a better and safer planet.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about your experience at James Madison University.
Okay, at James Madison, as I said, in September 1971, I entered James Madison. At that time, it was known as Madison College, but it was later renamed James Madison University. And I was the first African-American baseball player at Madison back in 1971, which was a positive experience for me, because it was about winning, and if a player can help win, we play together as a team. So that, I didn't understand, I did not realize that when I attended JMU to play baseball, but it was an honor to be representative of not only my family, but also King George and my friends, to have that distinction. And back in, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I had the pleasure of being honored at halftime, or just prior to a football game, with that distinction, which was pretty exciting. And I did not really give it a lot of thought, but someone at JMU apparently went back and looked at the records, and I was contacted about the opportunity to please attend a football game so I could be honored. And my family and I went up, and we had a great day there. Got to accept that honor. But in addition to that, I had the pleasure of working in the office of the president there approximately 15 hours a week if I was not away on baseball games, and supporting the sports information director, Rich Murray, who later moved on to UVA to be the sports information director there. And I also had the opportunity to serve 2 years as a resident advisor, which was interesting, because that's once again where responsibility comes into play. And if you're going to be a leader, you're going to have to demonstrate it through your actions and examples and how you carry yourself. So that was a very good experience for me to develop leadership skills as I was, moving through the journey in my life that carries me even to this day. I mean, we need to be responsible and accountable for what we do, and that is so critical in terms of how we may shape our lives.
Absolutely. So did you pursue these things, or were or the opportunities just showed up and you decided to go for it? How did that work for you?
The resident advisor position was an opportunity for me to apply, because what that entailed back in those days, if you were a resident advisor, and maybe it still could very well apply today, you would have your own room and your own bathroom. So you did not have to share with anyone else. But of course, it also helped that you were involved with the administration in terms of how you have to worry about the human care of your students as well. So you have to ensure that everyone on the floor, on the hall, is comfortable with their experience being a college student.
Right.
And so sometimes you may have to counsel a little bit, or if the residents would get a little noisy, you have to tell them to quiet down. And normally during the week, you have to reduce the volume on your music no later than 11 o'clock at night. So, but it also depends on what dorm you may have been in. And I just happen to have a dorm that consisted of freshmen, young men. So when they're freshmen like that, they're a little more naive in terms of, I'm going to try to do the right thing, but not always. But so it was a pretty pleasant experience doing those 2 years for me.
And I was wondering, you said you were the first Black man to be on the baseball team at JMU? The first and only?
No, I'm not the only. I was the first.
You were the first.
I was the first.
And, a lot of times when we reflect on, these honors, that I'm glad you got that honor. But it also, I would imagine, means that you faced some adversity and resistance, but somehow had the leadership inside yourself to be able to push through those things as well.
Well, to be candid with you, I really did not face any adversity because the upperclassmen on that team sort of took me in under their wing. I was when you're a freshman, and you're still learning the ropes in terms of what to do. You're a student first and an athlete second, and that's how it should always be. Student first, athlete second. Because if you're not a student and maintaining good academic standing, you're not going to be an athlete.
Right.
So I did not experience any adversity along that line, unless it very well could have been discreet, but overtly, no, I did not experience that.
Well, I'm very glad to hear that was your experience. So, so then how did things continue to evolve for you as you were going through your college career?
So I graduated in May of 1975, and after that, it took me about a year to find what I describe as a decent job with the potential to always look forward to ascending higher. And my first job as a full-time employee in the federal government I commenced that in 1976 at the Pentagon, and as a travel clerk. And I just knew that was not my goal or a stopping point for me, but it was an entry level to get in the federal government on a permanent basis. So that was the opportunity I took. And then later on, a couple of years later, I transferred over to the Naval Sea Systems Command in Crystal City, doing the same type of work. But there was an older African-American lady, who would tell me that you are destined for better opportunities. And she indicated that I know a lady that works in the Office of Procurement, and these two ladies are dear to me. They're both deceased now. Amanda Will was the administrative officer up in the Office of Procurement at NAACP at the time, who was a white lady, and they knew each other. And she had asked me to get a copy of my, back in those days, it was called the 171 in the federal government, not the resume we use today.
Okay.
And she said, bring me a copy of your 171. And I did. And about 2 weeks later, I was interviewed for a 3-year internship in procurement. And thank God I was selected. And I entered that program. It's almost like starting college over again, because you still have to take so many training classes and courses. And in some instances, colleges or universities prepare you as an individual that says that you have the ability to learn and you can comprehend other aspects of life, because if you're the private sector or federal government, then they very well may put you into intern programs to basically retrain you to allow you to have the jargon that's needed to perform that function in your company or the federal government. So after I completed the 3-year program, I remained at NAACP and had the opportunity to work on an international rolling airframe development program that was partnered with the U.S., West Germany, and Denmark at that time. And that same rolling airframe missile in the past has appeared on the History Channel. And back in those days, General Dynamics, Pomona, California, was the company that was developing that missile. But today, I think there are other companies involved, because that missile is still in use today on ships around the world, in various countries that are allies with the United States also purchased those rolling airframe missiles. So that was an international program that allowed me the opportunity to travel overseas for program reviews, etc., which was a very good experience for someone coming out of King George to have an opportunity to travel internationally. And you get to see other cultures, environments, etc., and how people interact with each other. So that was enlightening for me. And I also worked on, while I was at NAACP, the Aegis program. That's a program and project and software that supports the naval ships out at sea today. And I think Aegis probably is still around, even though this was back in the early 80s. But I think there's still support for Aegis programs going on at NAACP as well. So that was a very interesting program as well. And then around April of 1985, I accepted a position at NASA headquarters. And the ironic thing about that position was a friend of mine who was working at NASA headquarters at the time had called me up. He says, "Are you interested in coming over to NASA?" And I said, yeah, because I was sort of getting to the point of you're purchasing weapons, military weapons, and these weapons are designed to kill if we need to be defensive. And I said, well, maybe I want to transition, because NASA was kind of unique in its way later on, as I found out in life. And so I went over for the interview, and it was 3 branch chiefs that interviewed me, and they said, "You're overqualified for the job." That may have been one instance where it could have been potentially a red flag. But that's okay. I was overqualified. It's better to be overqualified than underqualified, so they could not use that rationale. 2 weeks later, I received a call from the assistant administrator of procurement at NASA. That's the top in our organizational chart. You have the administrator for the Office of Procurement, because each organization has the lead individual. So we have the administrator, and then we have the assistant administrator. And so the assistant administrator for procurement called me. He said, "Do you want a job in NASA?" I'm thinking to myself, what's going on here? And I said yes. And his name was Admiral, cannot think of Admiral Hopkins. Admiral Hopkins was his name. And he had worked at NAACP as well. But I really did not interface with him a lot at NAACP because I was in the internship program. And but he offered me the job. And as they say, the rest is sort of history regarding that. But I did go to NASA headquarters, and I worked in the NASA headquarters Office of Procurement, and later on I will explain there's a difference between the NASA headquarters Office of Procurement and the agency Office of Procurement. And so I worked there for a couple of years, and then I was promoted to a branch chief at the NASA headquarters office, and I had the opportunity to manage about 37 people. And which, once again, still developing leadership skills, and someone is seeing something in me, and that's where I go back to Mrs. Jones way back when. She said, "You're destined for something different than this." And so I worked that, and as you can see in one of the instances in the letter from the administrator back in 2011 was the awarding the first Russian contract. And that was after the breakup of the old Soviet Union. And we were very concerned about what could happen to some of that technology if we did not be able to procure some of it. And we were able to do it because that procurement system and the way the Soviet Union operated back in those days, it was just totally different, because it was, number one, it was a communist country back then, so they did not have the rules and regulations that we would have to follow. And so that was a defining moment for that particular activity, working as a branch chief. And a few years later, my top boss decided, well, I'm going to move you. It's time for you to move. I want you to do something else. So I moved into the agency level Office of Procurement, which is responsible for all of the field activities around the country. Depending on dollar threshold, for example, anything that was operating out in the field would have to come to headquarters. For example, any program you may be working on, if it were $25 million procurement, then it would have to come to headquarters to be reviewed. And the senior procurement analyst is the first person. And that's the position I'm in. I have to manage it. I have to set up or schedule meetings and ensure that the documentation is going to be acceptable, because it has to go up to the administrator's office. And you really want to avoid any mistakes along the way if possible, but it does happen, because in so many instances in science or human spaceflight programs, it is so complicated that it has to be screened, and there's some risk factors that need to be taken. And for example, the shuttle program had over 2 million working parts to it. So any little item or widget could create a major problem. So everything had to be vetted extremely carefully, and the meetings were normally with the program and the procurement office to ensure that we were ready to go forward with any type of contractual arrangements with the private sector. So that activity was pretty intense. And then also in my earlier years at NASA back in 1992, when we were really interested in exploring Mars, I participated in the Mars Observer Program, which sort of set the standard for the rovers that are up there now on Mars looking for life. And so that was an opportunity that was also very challenging, but extremely rewarding. And the two babies, well, there are about three babies that I'm also fond of here at the International Space Station, which is over $100 billion program. And that hardware is still flying around the Earth as we speak. And the research that's being done on it will hopefully reap rewards for us here on the planet Earth. And there's also collaboration with the International Space Station with other countries as well. If you've followed NASA in the past, you know that astronauts are from various countries, and we collaborate with the Russians on their Soyuz rockets, and we would alternate going up. And those were not cheap seats. I was involved in purchasing some of those seats when the shuttle was not flying after it had the accident in 2004.
Right.
For a while there. So, but it was good. It worked out, and they worked well together up there. And of course, the U.S. astronauts would go to Russia to train if they were flying on Soyuz to the International Space Station, and that's been great. And to work on such a complicated yet rewarding program as well. And then the privilege of working on the shuttle program. This was an opportunity to meet a number of the astronauts who are very bright people, but they're very down to earth and friendly as well. And so you could always have a conversation with any of them if they were in the area. And by me supporting the Human Exploration Directorate, I could, see them quite a bit because they would come to headquarters, and most of the time when they're not flying there at Johnson Space Flight Center, still training and being in the command room, learning what they need to do, etc. So that was important, and my wife and I had the opportunity. My wife Pam had the opportunity to attend 2 shuttle launches, including the last shuttle launch. And when you attend those launches, then you feel the gratification and the hard work and the sacrifice that you made and your family has made towards you helping to support something of that magnitude, because that is risky business. And that's why I applaud, so many of those NASA personnel that go through such intimate detail on ensuring that everything is good to go, although there aren't any guarantees.
Right.
But they maximize the risk that through various analysis to ensure that we're comfortable flying. And in addition to that, I was involved with the SpaceX. That's Elon Musk. When this activity first came along, there were skeptics out there that says, only the government can do this kind of activity of, contracting with Boeing most of the time, and Lockheed back in those days, that would be doing shuttle International Space Station. But Elon Musk sort of came out of nowhere and saying, we want to participate in some of these commercial activities that NASA has on the forefront. And the first activity was to fly unmanned payload, which is the first test without humans on it. And I can recall that my administrator came to me with drafts, just a statement of work. Had no idea where it came from, but he'd ask myself and the attorney that I'd worked with on most of all the International Space Station items, Eveline, who was really good, she was now retired as well, said, you all take this and tell us what you think about it, and is this doable? And we took it, we scrubbed it, and we say it's doable. So we put out bids for proposals for this particular requirement, and there were still skeptics at NASA that SpaceX is not qualified to do this, but we go through what we call source boards, and we have to do an evaluation, but it was a determination was made that they can do this, and I was one of those people that was saying, I think they can do this because this is something new, and we may be able to save some money in the long run. But there was an injunction filed against the award of the contract in the federal court. As a result of that, this is what I consider really one of the great accomplishments that I can personally say helped along the way was the general counsel and myself actually wrote the statement to get the federal judge to relinquish the injunction, and therefore SpaceX was cleared to go forward, and that was just a really, really good time because that was something different at NASA. It was not the standard way we dealing with the same contractors all the time. We were great contractors, but sometimes you need competition to lower the prices.
Right.
And that's what, we were really driving at there. And so we were very happy about that. And I did do one other unique thing with the Brazilian Space Agency. That was in the letter that you read earlier, that they had never done any contracting with the federal government before, not to mention the U.S. Their thought process was, well, we just, give you money. We just give you a briefcase full of money. We said, no, the procurement process doesn't work that way. And we actually ended up making 2 trips to Brazil before that particular deal was consummated. And what that was all about, back in those days when the shuttle was flying, when it would get close to the equator and about 4 hours from the Amazon, the command center temporarily would lose communications. And the task was to go to Brazil, find a location where it could be monitored. And we were able to get that accomplished. I remember negotiating until midnight because our plane was leaving the next morning, and to get that deal accomplished. And the Brazilian space agency called INPE, was so gracious that they actually had given me a certificate in support of that program, which, I still have, but I'm sure one of these days, if my kids run across it, they'll probably say, what is this? And we know what happened to it. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. And the last thing I would say about NASA before I go to community give back kind of discussion is to receive the Exceptional Service Medal from NASA was clearly a surprise and a great honor, because that's one of the highest civilian awards that you can receive from NASA for your dedicated service. So that's etched in my heart to the degree to think that that was granted to me. And for the most part, I am, a modest person, and I appreciate, the letter from the administrator back in 2011. But I say to people, it's your faith in which you believe. You believe, if you believe in God, it's your faith. He has a destiny for us, and I was just traveling along on that destiny with him, and to have the opportunity to experience what I've experienced throughout life and at NASA in particular, because that's where I spent the bulk of my career working. And now, if you do not have any questions related to NASA, then I will just go to how I view giving back to the community plays a role in our society.
I don't have any specific questions. I just love hearing how much you love what you did. And I'm sitting here thinking how wonderful it would be if, once all of this COVID situation settles out, to have you invite you to come and speak in King George County to some of the high school students, because your example could be so inspiring to so many students. And thank you for the service and the impact you've made on our nation. Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Now, as I look back over my life, I think that community is vital for all of us, because there was someone there helping us along the way, as I had identified those two ladies back in the 70s that really didn't know me personally, but I came to know them and really thank them for what they did for my career. And that's special to me, because they were two older ladies. When I say older ladies, I'm probably in my 20s, and when I say older back then, they probably were in their 40s. But
right.
To me, they were that, but they were so pleasant to me.
Yes.
And I'm so thankful for that. Now, in terms of giving back to the community, I've done a few things that I would just like to highlight. And once again, we all need support. So I have no pride in saying, well, I did this. No, I didn't do this. Someone helped me to do what I've done in life. And now, a couple of instances, giving back in King George, for example. Potomac Elementary School. I had a sister, Julia Scranage, who was an employee there, and I think she also helped the kids with their reading skills as well. And I think there was a science teacher. Maybe asked her, well, can you get your brother to come and visit us on, career day, etc. And I thought about it, and I knew some folks at NASA, and so I decided, okay, I'll accept. But I was fortunate enough to find some astronauts and scientists that were willing to do this, because they love visiting schools to talk about science. And so that was a great opportunity. I think the first visit was back in 1998, and there was an article written up in the King George Journal at that time. I think that newspaper may not be in existence any longer, but I'm not sure. I don't live in King George, so I'm not sure whether it is or it's not.
Unfortunately, we don't have it anymore. So thank you for sharing this with us.
Okay. So the kids were really, really excited about that experience. So I would periodically take astronauts and scientists there on different visits. Try to do it at least once a school year. Maybe we may have done that 2 or 3 years in a row back then. And then around 2002, this was really big, and it sort of made national news for King George and for Potomac Elementary School. There's a little kid in 3rd grade, I believe, and I believe his last name is Tate. And back in those days, there was a character called Flat Stanley. And Flat Stanley basically was a coloring construction figure, paper. And he was flat. And I guess it was being done around the country. I don't know about around the world. But anyway, you wanted to take Flat Stanley around the world on trips, vacations, etc. So he had asked me to collaborate with him. Oh, I'm just looking. By the way, his name is Vernon Tate. He was a third grader at the time. So I think my sister may have given me Flat Stanley. It's laminated. So I'd taken him to Johnson Space Flight Center, which is located right outside of Houston. I had pictures taken with the Texas Longhorn Steer, the command center at Johnson Space Center, and some other pics. And then I came across this thought in my mind. It says, it would be really neat if Flat Stanley were to fly to the International Space Station. And so I ran the idea by my superiors, who went to the administrator, who was Sean O'Keefe at that time. He said, sure, why not? This would be great. So Flat Stanley flew on the shuttle to the International Space Station and returned, and NASA decided, or the administrator decided, we're going to go to that school and present Flat Stanley and a portrait and other items for little Vernon, as well as taking 2 astronauts with us. I think it was Sandra Magnus and Leland Melvin, who spoke to the kids there. They were dressed in their astronaut suits, fatigues, basically, not the ones that they go on the shuttle with, but their suits are normally blue when they're on duty, shall we say, working. And that was a really, really good experience, because the principal at that point in time, she's deceased today as well, as Deborah Bushra. She was so excited. She said, I'm getting all of these calls from these news networks, et cetera, et cetera. And it was just about giving back to the community. I was more happy for them because they were just so excited about that experience. And to my knowledge, that particular Flat Stanley is the only one that has flown to the International Space Station. We did have one maybe a long, long time ago that had flown on a shuttle, but not to the International Space Station. So Potomac Elementary School can be proud of that particular situation as being it for that. And also in King George, early on, back, even though I was still at NASA, we started a mentoring youth group in the mid-90s. And the little group was called Brothers United Moving in the Spirit. It was young men. And it was a collaboration between Salem Baptist Church and Little Ark Baptist Church, pastored by Reverend Dr. Michael T. Bell at Little Ark and Reverend Leonard Bland at Salem. And the genesis of this mentoring program was to allow the kids to go on visits to museums, participate in basketball leagues, and which gave them the opportunity to learn team member skills, sharing, and supporting each other. So that was a really a nice mentoring program for a while there, but I helped get that implemented through both pastors, and it worked out really well. Unfortunately, I sort of moved on a little bit up in this area, and I got more involved in the Maryland, Washington, D.C. area with mentoring at my kids' elementary school up here at the time, and then also at my church, and also with the big brothers and big sisters, just about trying to give back to the kids, encouraging them to let them know that you can do anything you want to do if you put your mind to it. Do not let obstacles stop you from dreaming about what you want to do, because that's the purpose of obstacles. They try to get in your way, but you have to maneuver around those obstacles to say, I'm going to get this accomplished. It may not be easy, but that's so important. And I guess in closing, as you evolve in life, and I'm thankful. I'm a Christian, and I love the Lord, and God has allowed me. And I kept saying no initially, but He says, the pastor asked me to be chair of Al Dagan at Peace Baptist Church, which is Dagan is for officers or deacons or deaconess, and so I take that position seriously as well, in terms of, once again, giving back to the community, showing love and care for each other. And that's still going to be vital to how we as a people on this earth need to live going forward. And that's kind of about my experience through life thus far. And I'm just thankful for it and give God the credit.
I love what you said about obstacles. The way you framed that is just so powerful. I think far too often it seems like people get paralyzed by obstacles instead of the way you said it. You just said it so like, well, naturally there's going to be obstacles and they're there to blockade us, but we can find a way around or through. And it was very powerful how you said that.
Okay, and then I also have one last, I guess, statement or comment in terms of, I know sometimes people, individuals get into discussions about equality. Equality is extremely important, absolutely. But number one, if any individual is given an opportunity, if they're qualified, the opportunity itself equals equality. Because what that says is, I get the same opportunity as the next person, et cetera, because if I meet the standards of qualification, et cetera, and that's where true equality comes into play, is opportunity. If an individual is not given an opportunity, then we do not know what they have to offer, and none of us should be intimidated by opportunity, because it's going to make us all better in the long run. And I know that's a loaded statement, but I also believe that is the truth. And we have to let pride go, or whatever the other activities or concerns that we may have locked in our brains, that it's got to be this way. But opportunity creates equality and the betterment for man or humankind.
Can I reflect on that? And is what I'm hearing you say is that a person may not always feel 100% sure if they're really prepared for the opportunity that's in front of them, but go for it, take it, learn in it, and grow and evolve, and take every opportunity you possibly can, even if it's scary to take it.
Oh, I think absolutely. I think the ground rules must be the same for everyone that's put in that position. Because we're not always going to succeed the first time. We may not succeed the second time in terms of what we're trying to accomplish. But given the opportunity to succeed, then we will have a learning curve that says, okay, if I do it again, I can do it better this way versus another way. And that's all I think anyone ever asks for, is just an opportunity. If preparation is key, but I think if being qualified for something has allowed you to be prepared, but also recognizing the fact that whatever you do in life, or occupation, career, etc., there's still going to be a learning curve, even though you're qualified. It's almost like if you're a physician, he or she may not know all of the ins and outs, and sometimes they also go through trials and errors. They may try this and they may try that. And that's the same thing with anyone else asking for an opportunity to succeed, and not be colored by a bias to the degree that I don't think that individual can do that. Because we really don't know what that individual can do until they're given an opportunity.
Amen to that, for sure. You know, Jeff, when we spoke the other day, you said something that I was very curious about, and I said, save the answer for the podcast, you know. And you said that you prepared yourself for things to go positively. Yes,
and what I mean by prepare yourself. Put yourself, if you're number 2 or you're number 3, in an organization or whatever, you always have to view yourself as being in that position of authority. And I learned a lot of this from the Federal Executive Institute that I had taken that course at UVA through the Federal Government Office of Personnel Management. And that's how we plan and sort of strategize, okay, if I'm called to be in this position, am I prepared? I may not be 100% prepared, but I am prepared to take on the challenge, put in the effort to be able to do the job. And it's no different whether you're in a worldly environment or whether you're in a spiritual environment. Leadership is a learning experience because none of us will ever know everything in life. We may think we do, but we don't, because things do happen, and we have to make adjustments.
Well, I think you've given people a wealth of information and encouragement and a lot to think about as far as not allowing the world to limit you, and certainly don't limit yourself.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for sharing with us in honor of Black History Month. It's been an honor and a privilege to participate in this podcast with you. Thank you so much.
And thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely.